In 1989, Steve Williams enrolled in a wrestling academy in Dallas. He had been to a few matches at the Sportatorium and thought he could be just as good, if not better, than the wrestlers he'd seen. It was as simple as that.
I really didn't learn a whole lot in there, but what it was a foot in the door to be able to get noticed or actually get in the ring in front of people. Because, at the time I had long blonde hair, and like I said, I was in shape. I looked like I could be the part.
At 6'2" and a perfectly proportioned 250 pounds, Steve was noticed by other up-and-coming wrestlers who were already on the regional circuit.
I thought I'd get a kick out of seeing just how bad these new wrestlers were, and by and large they were terrible, with the exception of this one big kid with blonde hair. And it was just like everything he did just automatically looked better than everybody else's. And I mean, if you had asked me to pick out a star, I'd say that guy is going to be a star. And found out a couple days later his name was Steve Williams.
Ken and Beverly Williams didn't know what to make of their son's new career. It was a far cry from the insurance business where Ken made his living, and was prepared to make a place for Steve had Steve wanted that. And for all his interest in sports, Steve had never wrestled. Edna High School didn't even have a wrestling team.
I said, well, no, sweetheart, if that's what you want to do, then that's what you should do. And he said, well, this isn't going to bother you, me trying this wrestling. And I said, no, Steve, not at all. With the one stipulation that you change your name. And he laughed, and I meant it as a joke. We were just teasing.
Steve cared a great deal about what his parents thought. He remained close to his family even as his profession took him far from home. He regularly mailed postcards back to Edna, keeping Ken and Beverly informed of his progress. The Williams raised Steve to make his own decisions. They stood by him and respected his choice. He was very serious about it.
Steve, when he broke in the 80s, we had a lot of guys, bodybuilders, that just wanted to be on TV and thought they could be a wrestler, and they really didn't take the work ethic to heart like Steve did. Steve learned every facet of the business, and he was a good wrestler.
His 5 months of training were just the start of Steve's education.
I was pretty ignorant going into it. The business was so protected back then. If you had to believe anything, you'd believe it was a little bit more real than not real.
Professional wrestling and the way it was presented were still changing in the late 1980s. Despite the success of many standouts over the decades, the sport was not the overproduced, over-the-top event it is today. Those running the business didn't admit that the theatrics on display then were what they now promote as entertainment.
We're part talk show, we're part action-adventure, we're part a little comedy thrown in there, or maybe I should say humor, as compared to what some people would think of, two men in their underwear in a squared circle somewhere.
On December 11th, 1989, Steve entered the ring for his first big match. His opponent was Frogman LeBlanc. Steve won and was paid $40. This and his other contests were broadcast on local television.
Yeah, confidence. That was, boy, I was scared to death I was going to mess something up, do something wrong, just not know what to do, when that camera goes on and just kind of freeze up. And but I made it through that, and I was nervous for a good many years.
But Steve was doing something right. The United States Wrestling Association moved him to Tennessee, where his boss forced him to wrestle under a new name, one he hated.
It was 15 minutes before the matches started, and I was scared to death. This was my first match in front of a bunch of guys I didn't know. And he said, all right, your name is Steve Austin. I said, well, hell, I don't want to be Steve Austin, because I used to watch The $6 Million Man. I didn't want to copy the guy. He goes, well, what's your name? I said, I don't know. He goes, okay, you got 15 minutes to come up with a name. So he comes back in 5 minutes. He goes, what'd you come up with? I said, nothing. He goes, okay, you're Steve Austin. That's how I got the Austin part of it.
Steve Austin wasn't getting rich in 1990. The $20 he made for each of his 5 weekly bouts barely allowed him to pay bills. Eventually, he ran out of money.
For 3.5 days, I ate raw potatoes. I had a pocket knife that my dad gave me for hunting, so I couldn't cook them. Didn't have nothing to cook them with. They used to call it the Nutrisystem territory because everybody went there lost weight. Times were pretty tough.
He and I always had a certain camaraderie in that we didn't believe in spending a lot of money, you know, so we had a history of splitting some pretty cheap motel rooms. You know, we didn't get the Cadillac on the road. You know, we'd kind of jam as many wrestlers as possible into a Lumina. So I saw Steve suffer financially.
Steve could have turned to his parents for money, but he didn't. And when they offered it, he refused to take it.
I think he was just determined to make it on his own.
He explains this as he had to pay his dues. And he didn't want anyone else to have to pay for or suffer, but he never asked for help.
Just before his 26th birthday, Steve married his high school sweetheart, Kathy Burris. She had been his girlfriend for 10 years. It was the only romantic relationship he'd ever had. The union came to an end within a year. Steve's sole focus was on his job. He was constantly analyzing his moves and looking for ways to distinguish his character from all the others. Giving up was not an option.
I never did say, God, what am I doing? Because I enjoyed going down the road so much, thinking about what I was going to do in my next match, what little combination I might be able to come up with, something different, something that someone else wasn't doing. Back in my mind was always turning about what I could do in my next match.
He had wrestled as a good guy, or babyface as they're known in the business. A friend suggested that Steve become a bad guy or heel. The same man gave Steve yet another new name, Stunning. With it came a cocky aura Steve had gradually developed during his 18 months on the job.
He's always said he wants to be a bad guy, and why, I don't know. But maybe you get more attention as a bad guy.
It was all an attitude type thing for me. When you say stunning, I mean, I've always been, I'm okay looking, but I'm not extravagant or stunning, actually. It's more or less a mindset.
And it launched Steve from the farm team to the big leagues. In 1991, he signed with World Championship Wrestling, one of the two heavyweight organizations in the business.
I don't remember looking at Stunning Steve Austin and saying, boy, this guy is going to one day be the hottest commodity in wrestling. But I do know that he had a certain flair.
Steve's $75,000 a year salary and the exposure he received on nationwide television should have been his ticket to superstardom, but they weren't.
Now, there's no guarantee when you get in this job that you're going to be a star. There wasn't any guarantees on me. I just don't happen to be a quitter.